Welcome to the Grange Podcast, where we strive to rekindle the spirit of community and belonging. Our mission is simple, yet profound: to foster transparent communication and share valuable information that brings us closer together. Join us as we explore stories, insights, and conversations with the intent of building a stronger, more connected community, one episode at a time. Today, my guest is Rod Fogle. Rod is a husband, father, pilot, avid outdoorsman, and along with his wife, Sue, owner of Fogle Pump and Supply. During our conversation, we discussed Rod's personal history, including his family's legacy in the car dealership business, his start in entrepreneurship, partnerships along the way, and many stories and insights from owning Fogle Pump and Supply for the last 44 years. I was beyond excited when Rod agreed to come on the podcast, and I am grateful for the conversation we had. I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I did recording it. During our conversation, Rod mentioned that his grandfather's first car dealership was located in the old Odd Fellows building in Colville, which is now where Cafe Italiano is. Neither of us was familiar with the origins of the Odd Fellows, so I did a little research last night, and this is what I found. The Independent Order of Odd Fellows, Colville Lodge number 109, was founded in 1891 and built its first lodge building in 1897. The first leader was Robert E. Lee, a prominent local businessman and former mayor. The Independent of Odd Fellows itself is a fraternal organization founded in 1819 to provide social support and charity, with a focus on visiting the sick, relieving the distressed, and burying the dead. I couldn't find when the Colville chapter of the Odd Fellows was dissolved, but I find these old chapters, such as the Odd Fellows, Elks, JCs, Lions Club, etc., fascinating, and often wonder why these groups became obsolete. Maybe it's time to get something going again. If you find value in our conversation, please help spread the word by sharing this podcast with a friend. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button to be notified when a new episode is released. Anyone interested in coming on the podcast can reach out to thegrangepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for tuning in. Now, here's my conversation with Rod Fogle. All right, we are now live. Got Rod Fogle from Fogle Pump and Supply with me today. Rod, welcome to the Grange Podcast.
Great to be here, Josh. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Really appreciate you making the time and look forward to having this conversation. You're a guy that I've known my whole life as far as a community member, in Colville, Kettle Falls, but honestly, not on a personal basis that well. So I'm really excited to learn more about you.
Well, be careful what you wish for.
For sure. For sure. Quick funny story to start out with. About 10 years ago, I walk into your brother Steve's motorsports shop, and it was in the winter. So I was slow. I was off work probably, and I'm sure I was going in for snowmobile parts. And Steve comes out of his office. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Just wrenching on sleds." He goes, You want to go fly later on?" And I said, "Fly?" He goes, "Yeah, my brother's taking a plane out, going to go fly." I said, "Shit, yeah, that'd be awesome. I've never done that." And hold on. And so I think he calls you. And then he goes, "Weatherman, what do you weigh?" I said, "I'm about 270 right now." He realized that back, and you do the quick math, and he goes, "Never mind, you can't go today." I always laughed about that. I got my hopes up and then crashed down. So I can go now. I've dropped some weight. So
yeah,
next
I was
time,
say you are not
ring.
270 now. Yeah. Well, back then probably Paul Gorley might have been going along as well.
I think Paul was going.
And
yeah,
was a large man. So yeah, it was probably a little overload for our little 182.
For sure. Do you still fly quite a bit?
Actually, I haven't been in the seat for a while. I've gotten so busy and everything. I still have ownership in the plane with John Buterak.
Oh, cool.
And, but I haven't been up in a while. So, and I do miss it because it's enjoyable.
I bet. And how long have you had a license?
Well, that's really not necessarily a funny story, but the history of me and my family, you may or may not know, but brother Steve, and I've got two sisters, Wendy and Julie. Anyway, when we were kids, my folks were killed in a small plane crash here leaving Colville. They were headed over to the coast, actually, with the founder of Colmac Industries, Jerry McMillan, and his wife. And anyway, they got into bad weather and had crashed. And we lost the four of them, which was devastating, of course. Again, I was just a teenager at the time. So after that, years after that, I got interested. My dad loved to fly, and so did Jerry and what have you. My grandma was still alive, my dad's mom, and I started taking some flying lessons with Johnny Hedrick, probably when I was in my 30s. And my grandma said, please, please, please do not take this up while I'm alive. So I honored her wish, and I didn't do any more flying. And then after she had passed away, I'd used the local Steve Pietroburgo, who's a CFI here and did a lot of flying. And I had need to go to different areas for different things, and I would get Steve to fly us down. And I said, I got to get back into taking lessons and doing this. So anyway, I went through with it then, and Steve was my instructor, and I got my license. And that would have been probably 25 to 30 years ago now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was that a difficult thing to get behind the wheel with, the
and
situation?
that's a natural thing to ask. And I know a lot of people have wondered, well, how could you do that? And I said, well, people get killed in car accidents every day. You get killed crossing the street. And I'm a fair weather flyer. I will tell you that. I never got my instrument rating. So a day like today right now is beautiful out there. And I'm a very cautious flyer. And that's probably because of that accident, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think of that when I jump in the plane to take off and go, that this may be it. But that could be it when I jump in my pickup and drive back to Colville today from Kettle. 395 is
that's scary.
It's scary, as you know. As
Absolutely.
You know,
yeah. What do you enjoy most about flying?
The freedom and the just being out and looking over this country. Living here all my life. I was born in Mount Carmel Hospital back in December of 1956. About to turn 69 here pretty soon. And being in the business that I'm in now, the water well drilling business, I get to go around and see a lot of the different areas. And my God, the people that have moved in and the places. Well, to get up in the air and to fly over some of this country gives you a whole different perspective, and seeing, the development that's happened, the new homes and all the different things. So it's a bird's eye view, if you want to call it that. So that to me is enjoyable. And then, going to places like Priest Lake or over to Omak or things like that can be kind of a lengthy drive.
Yeah.
But you jump in an airplane and those spots are quick and easy, 30, 35 minutes, you're to those places where it's 2.5 hours driving.
Yep, absolutely.
So, yeah.
I bet it's incredible to have seen the infrastructure growth over the last 30 years from the air. I just see it from asphalt, but like that Rathdrum to Coeur d'Alene area I was in a couple months ago, and that's going to be touching here pretty soon. And just some of these other North Spokane, Deer Park. I bet that's wild.
Well, that area for us in Deer Park, which we've got a branch down there that our son Robert runs, it's basically a bedroom community of Spokane now, and they're growing together, and like Spokane Valley going to Post Falls, and like you say, it's all just kind of joining. It's going to be crazy what it's going to be in your lifetime, how that's going to change.
Yeah. As a young kid, I remember briefly what North Spokane looked like, that Wandamere area. And it's changed, drastically in my short time of, that's in 20 years that I probably remember back or so. And
yeah, big time. Because I remember going to Spokane, as a young guy. And Kmart was out there on the north side of Spokane, and that was a lot of times a destination going to Kmart, which has long been gone there. But that was kind of where Spokane started, or the rollercade that's still there, to go roller skating.
Yep, Patterson's.
Yeah.
I used to go there as a kid.
Yeah, me too.
Did you really?
That tells you how old that place is.
I didn't know it had been there that long.
Yeah, it's been there a long time.
Yeah, that was a big deal. We'd like junior high. I don't know, a couple weekends out of the year. We'd go down on a Friday and you'd be able to do the couple skate and meet some Spokane girls or whatever. And it was big stuff
Josh.
at that time.
I never did anything like that.
I'm sure. So with most of my guests, Rod, I like to just kind of get a brief overview and take it back, to upbringing, childhood. So December 56, Mount Carmel Hospital. Are you a Cobble or Kettle graduate?
I actually did graduate. People question that, but I did graduate in Colville in 1975. I actually was my senior class president. We just had our 50th graduation anniversary already, 50 years. They tell you how fast it goes by, and I'll tell you that too, Josh, because you're young, but it's going to go by fast. It goes by fast, but man, what a ride. Yeah.
I'm just grasping the time thing. I don't know if it feels like it's been since my 30s. I realize how fast it can go.
Yeah.
Where prior to it, it almost seemed like it wasn't moving. It seems, I remember just thinking that things happened so slow. And now in my 30s, I'm just like, where'd it go?
Where'd it go? I know I've got kids now that are in their 40s. And truthfully, at heart, I still feel like I'm in my 40s. So I'm like, how in the heck did my kids get to be older than I am now?
When did that happen?
But then when I look in the mirror and I don't see a red afro anymore and it's a gray, white, half gone, it's like, wow, who is that looking back at me?
Yeah.
So anyway, I was born here in Colville. My dad was born in Colville here as well. My grandpa came, my dad's dad, came in the late 20s, I think. He started Fogle's Garage in 1933.
Wow.
I still have some old mirrors with an old Cadillac on them that says Fogle's Garage, rolling along since 1933.
Wow.
So as a kid, remembering that business was located in what's now the Cafe Italiano.
Yep.
They're right next to the Danica's funeral home, and it was the Oddfellows meeting hall. It's a neat old building. It's like a 3-story building, and when you get up to the very top, I remember as a kid running around in there, and they had, like velvet chairs for their exalted rulers or whatever their hierarchy was, and it was really a neat building. But that's where the dealership was. And they had Ford, Pontiac, Cadillac, Oldsmobile, and originally Grandpa had Studebaker and Packard way back when. And then across the street to the north, there's an empty lot there behind like Rancho Chico and that area. That was the actual car lot. And then as you go to the south side of that building, out where the little bar, I can't remember the name of it now, that's in the backside.
Is it Cowboys and Angels?
Yeah, Cowboys and Angels. That parking lot that's paved now, that was actually a wrecking yard that my dad and Grandpa had, and all the old cars and everything set out there in that location.
Wow.
So then when Dad got, older and started running the car company for my grandpa, which I don't know what year that would have been. I'm going to say that would have been in the early 60s. But in 1972 or 3, Dad bought the Southtown, and Southtown at that point was just starting to grow. And now where the Country Chevrolet store is, that was the Fogle Motor Company building.
Okay.
But the very center of that building, and if you really look at the design of that, you can kind of see that they built around an old building that was there. And that building that was there was Wakanda Boats. And, Colville's known for Hughescraft, of course.
Yeah.
But there was a fiberglass boat builder here called Wakanda back in the day.
Wow.
And there's still some of the fiberglass on the concrete in that center section of that building. So I was just a teenager then at that point when Dad, and actually we were talking about Terry Baxter earlier.
Yeah.
Terry was involved with expanding that building. He was a painter and did a lot of that stuff. Dick Hurst, which was a local builder. Jim Bailey was all involved with adding on to that dealership and getting that building prepped for the new Southtown Fogle Motors. And at that time, it was Mom and Dad were killed in June 3rd of 1974. He had just gotten moved over into that building before the accident. So I remember working there. In fact, one of my high school projects, I had John Hyatt as my shop teacher in high school. And one of the projects I took on, Dad had a really neat old wood desk. And I was totally refinishing that, getting that ready for his new office. and had it almost done. We weren't quite out of school yet. So anyway, I didn't get to give it to Dad. I had it all done for him to go in his new office there. So that's kind of the history of the Fogle Motors. And once I was being catered to take on the being in the car business. That's what I was born with and done. And I was working as a car washer for Dad and renovating, cleaning cars and buffing them. And back then they lacquered the engines, they painted the trunks. I mean, we really made them look like new, to sell a used car. So my very good friend and now past partner since we've sold, and that's another story that I may get into, Dave LeDuc.
Yep.
Dave is a really, really good friend of mine, and we go back a long, long ways. His dad, Glenn, they moved over from the Bothell west side of the state here, and his dad, my dad also had the equipment company. It was Fogle Equipment, and it was where the Walmart store is now. And they had New Holland and Ford and Oliver, and then the Kubota was actually added later. But Glenn, Dave's dad, came and was running that equipment business for my dad as the manager. And those old timers around here may remember Tony Copeland, who was working at the car dealership and was kind of a semi, general manager under my dad. So after the accident, everything was left in a trust situation through what was Rainier Bank. And, I'll go on record saying that bankers really don't have any business trying to run business.
For sure.
Because that was a disaster, and it only lasted a couple of years, and the car business part of it ended up going way downhill, and they, meaning the bank, ended up selling the car dealership. So it sold to a guy by the name of Al Sherman. But thankfully we had Glenn LeDuc, who continued to run the tractor store for myself, my brother, and the two sisters, and the, quote, trust, because all of us were underage. And Glenn kept that thing going, and his son Dave was here, and Dave was working at the car dealership. Dave's a few years older than I am, but we were really close back then. And of course, he could go buy beer, and I couldn't. And you can guess what happens with that.
Yeah.
But we had a lot of good times together, and Dave and I were renovating cars, and then he graduated up to selling cars. And that was about the time that I graduated from high school in 1975.
Okay.
So I tried to go to college for a little bit. I wasn't sure because my life was so changed from the accident, and what I thought I was going to do with the rest of my life was no longer in the mix. So I went to 6 different colleges, and I made it about a little over a year and a half total.
6?
Yeah.
Wow.
Including Gonzaga, Willamette University.
Holy moly.
Both community colleges in Spokane, Wenatchee Valley Community College. Needless to say, college and me didn't really get along because I didn't know what the heck I was going to do.
Yeah.
So I ran into a guy by the name of Tom Beardsley that's from a Kettle Falls guy. Back
Still
in the
around,
day.
right?
Yeah, Tom's still alive, and he's over on the coast now. And he was Big Tom Enterprises back then.
I've heard that.
Yep. And he was a big promoter.
Yeah.
And there's a racetrack up in Northport to this day that's still going. Well, back then it had been going for some time, but it kind of failed. And Tom took on running that racetrack. Well, he found me and brought me in as a partner. So Tom and I started promoting the dirt races up in Northport under the name Panorama Speedway. And that would have been in the probably 77, 78.
Okay.
And Tom ended up moving on, and his brother Steve, who we shared an apartment going to college, and Steve actually finished college. I never came close, but he took over Tom's portion, and Steve and I did the promoting of that Panorama Speedway together, and we ran that for several years. And in doing that, we got the Wild Hares to start doing some demolition derbies. So some of you old timers around here may remember back in the demolition derby days, we actually had done 1 or 2 down in Chewelah at the rodeo arena just south of Chewelah. And then here in Colville itself, we did a number of them at the fairgrounds in there. And then we also hosted a couple up in Northport at the dirt track.
Okay.
Probably the one that we're maybe best known for that still goes back when Steve lives in Deer Park now, and we still stay connected. We got the wild hair back then that we were going to do this T-bone crash of dive bombing these cars in the middle of the arena for a crowd pleaser thing. Well, we advertised it as pancaking these cars. So Lori Matlock, her husband at the time, Wes was a contractor, builder kind of guy. Steve and I went down to Mosby's Menswear, and we rented tuxedos under the guise that we were going to a wedding. And actually, we were doing this demolition derby and this crash car thing. So we had a couple of old cars. We had a 51 Chevrolet with a 3 on the tree, was our drive car to bomb these other cars. Les Weaver and Dave Weaver and Mark Weaver were always very involved with the racing stuff. They had a couple of old big old Plymouth cars that they put in the middle of the arena. And Wes got down there that morning, and we said, okay, we need to build some kind of goddamn ramp that we're going to jump these cars and crash into them. And he goes, well, how high do I make it? And we're like, we have no idea how high you need to make this thing. You just kind of figure it out. There's the cars that we want to hopefully jump onto, kind of thing. So Wes grabbed some railroad ties and built this ramp for us. And Steve and I wearing the tuxedos, of course. Well, we'd had our girlfriends, and Lori wasn't a girlfriend at the time, but she helped with this, and they made a bunch of pancakes for us. So we came through the arena circling those 2 cars in the middle. Wes had built the ramp, but now we're throwing pancakes at these cars, saying, okay, we've pancaked these cars. Yeah. Of course, we're getting booed out of the arena at this point. So we go out of the arena, behind the grandstands. We slug a couple of beers real quick, and we flip to see who's going to drive and who has to ride. Well, I lose the flip. I have to ride. And that's not the fun thing when you're not in control. So Steve's driving. I'm riding. All we got is a helmet. We don't have any roll bars. We don't have anything. We knocked the windows out of the car before we did it, and that was it. And we're coming into that arena, and I'm like, you got to go faster, man. You got to go faster. And he's going as fast as that old 51 Chevy would go. And we hit that ramp, and we landed right on top of those cars. I thought my nuts were going to go through the floorboard. The fan went into the radiator of the car, and we were sitting on top of those 2 cars. I could hear the fan hitting the radiator, and I looked at Steve, and he looked at me, and I said, holy crap, we're alive. So, those of you that were around back then, and I don't know that year, but it would have been 78, 9, somewhere in that vintage. So, so that was that part, a chapter in my life.
How'd you keep Terry Browner from not being there?
I know, Terry Starr back in the day. I remember coming over when they lowered the river way down and they showed Kettle Falls again. And my mom was still alive. So that would have been, I'm going to say maybe 73 or early in 74 when he tried to, he did go through the falls here in Kettle Falls. Terry.
I got pictures on my cell phone. I'm part of this snowmobile forum online where guys talk about snowmobile stuff. And like 5 years ago, there was a thread that said, does anyone recognize this guy? And it's Terry Starr in what looks to be an Evel Knievel suit, American pinstripe onesie with a half helmet. And he's jumping cars at I recognize the Republic Fairgrounds.
Oh, right.
And he's got a cape and the whole shit and deal.
Yeah, he wanted to be Evel Knievel, and he did do some pretty crazy, stupid stuff.
He did, man.
And he survived it.
Those pictures, there was like 4 or 5 of them they posted. I saved them, but I'm just sitting there looking and going, there's no suspension on that snowmobile. Like I said, half cut out helmet. I would have loved to have been around to see that in person.
Oh boy. Yeah. That would have been something. So that's kind of where the next chapter of my life kicked off when we were running the racetrack up in Northport. Steve's dad, Merle, and we had one of the Fosbecks here came up, and we needed to build a concession stand toilet facility up there at that racetrack. So we got a bunch of blocks and what have you, and Steve and I and Merle, and then we hired local Northport guys, Gordy LeCaire and Sid Sell helped us, and we built that concession thing. The thing we didn't have is we didn't have any water for those toilets. So we hired the local well driller by the name of Casey Kane, who came up to drill the well. Well, unfortunately, what we thought was going to be a real shallow well and what he thought was going to be a real shallow well turned into being over 400 feet deep and we never got water. Needless to say, we owed a pretty large bill for the well to Casey Kane at the time, and we really didn't have the money to pay for that. And Ken needed people to work, and so I went to work for Casey Kane then in the well drilling business to help pay for this dry well we had up there.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was probably 1976. And I worked for Ken, and what was really turned out funny, I guess you could say in a way, is Ken was married to my wife Sue's sister. So we were brother-in-laws. Well, I wasn't married in 76. Sue and I got married in 78. But I was still working for Ken when Sue and I got married. So we were brother-in-laws at that point. And so that is where I learned the well drilling trade. I worked with a guy by the name of Eric Johnson, who's not living in the area anymore. He was a super good guy, and of course older than me. I was only 18, and a really, really good driller and a really good teacher. And I learned everything pretty much from him working for Casey Kane.
Okay.
So as the time went on, KC decided that we should maybe get into a restaurant business. So we actually thought, yeah, Colville really needs it. And we were talking about a Denny's type thing or something. And the next thing I knew, there's where the town center is in Colville now. There was a hotel called the Colville Hotel there. And there was a restaurant in the bottom of that called Bernie's. And Bernie Anderson and Diane, his wife at the time, Diane's now Aressa, and Bernie, I think, has passed away. They had Bernie's restaurant in the hotel. Well, they were wanting to sell it. So Casey Kane hooked up with a gentleman by the name of Ron Bible, and a lot of you guys around here may remember Ron Bible. He was known as being kind of a crazy guy. I always liked Ron, but he was a crazy guy. They hooked up to look at buying the hotel and restaurant. Well, here I am, 18, 19 years old, and we had actually bought a piece of property from my folks' estate, which is now where the Marugi Rains office is on Colville, on the main street there. That used to be a car lot when my dad was still alive. They sold motorhomes, open road campers and motorhomes and trailers there. So it was a vacant lot after the dealership had sold, and we thought, well, this would be a perfect spot to put this restaurant. So the family agreed to sell that lot to Ken and I to build this restaurant. Well, now he's going in business with Ron Bible, and they're buying out this other deal. And he says, well, come on, Fogle, you might as well get in on this too. And the three of us will buy this hotel restaurant thing. And I'm like, well, okay. So that was then BF and K, Bible, Fogle, and Kane.
Wow.
So I got involved in that, and that was about the time when the Studio 54 discotheque thing was really going wild back east, New York and whatever. So we decided in little town of Colville that we needed to do that. So Bernie's restaurant became Fogey's. We still had the Colville Hotel, and that there was a few rooms that you could rent by the night, but most of those were more like an apartment that the older people would rent by the month.
Okay.
So we put in Fogey's. We had a stainless steel dance floor. We had one of the disco balls in the ceiling. We had a fog machine. We had a DJ. It was awesome, and that place was rocking.
No way.
Yeah.
I've never heard of this in my life.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that place was rocking. Well, the problem was at that time, my wife, Sue Bourgeau, she was raised here close to Inchelium. Her dad, Hap, and Arlene, and she didn't. Thank God we're still married to this day. After 48 years, she put up with me as a bad boy back in the day, but I've been pretty good for a lot of years now. Right, honey? But I was 21 and she was 18. So I'm drilling wells by day and going to the discotheque and trying to run the bar and stuff at night. Well,
wow.
KC was not known to be a very good guy to his wife as far as he liked to have other women, and Ron Bible was well known for that.
Yeah. So
I was running with the wrong crowd as a newlywed.
For sure.
So that was an ugly scene for a little bit, but then unfortunately through that era of owning this hotel discotheque thing and a restaurant was part of the disco, Ron Bible unfortunately committed suicide. Casey Kane in the long run ended up going bankrupt. I actually got out of the business. All I did was lose money, which I had no money to lose at that point. Guy by the name of Bob Snyder. A lot of you guys around here will know Bob. He was famous with Barney's over here, Barney's Cafe, which was his father-in-law at one point, Barney Miller. And then Bob had built the restaurant across the street known as Hudson Bay.
Yeah.
Well, Bob, at that point was well known for being a heck of a chef, cook, steak guy. And A.G. Murphy's, if y'all remember the Murphy's steak that he was famous for over at Barney's, Bob came in and took over my interest in that restaurant, and Fogey's became Murphy's, A.G. Murphy's.
Really?
And it was a steakhouse in Colville in that hotel. So then there was a falling out between Bob and Casey Kane, and in the end, the place burned down. I don't know. I won't say any more than that. It burned down, and Bob and Ken went their different directions. That's about the time that 1981, and I think that place burned down in 1980, if I remember right. It was May of 1980. I got tied up with the Bargain Warehouse people, which was Harold Roeder, which is what Fogle Pump is now. And Bargain Bill Parrott started the Bargain Warehouse, and he was a good friend of my dad's back in the day, and that location was next to where the Whitty's Car Wash is now.
I remember that one.
Yeah, and that hasn't been gone for all that long, so you don't have to be that old to kind of remember that spot. And across the street towards Builder Shopping Center, there was a Honda dealer, Home Light Chainsaws, etc., owned by Earl Kittleson, and it was a motorcycle shop and stuff. And he also ran with my dad back in the day, and that was kind of a neat spot. Those boys like to go out and have a few drinks and do whatever, and the good old days, as they say. So Harold Roeder, who was Bargain Bill's son-in-law, he was married to Judy, and since divorced, but they were doing water systems. They didn't do any well drilling, and Glenn LeDuc, still then running the tractor store, said, Rod, you should really think about talking to Harold. Harold needs to get out of this. He's got a partner. It's not going very well. Harold's got a drinking problem, et cetera, et cetera. And I met Harold, and he and I hit it off good. And he says, yeah, kid, you need to think about buying this. And I said, I don't have any money. I don't have any way to buy this. And he goes, well, if you can get a down payment, I'll carry the contract. And I'm like, well, okay, I'll see what I can do. So I talked to my sister, Julie, who lives in Kodiak and has for many, many years on Kodiak Island. And she agreed to lend Sue and I the down payment to buy the Bargain Warehouse. So April 1st of 1981 is when Fogle Pump and Supply opened in what was the Bargain Warehouse. And all we did at that point was they had the little plumbing supplies. We didn't have a, quote, plumber to, go out and plumb stuff. But we sold all the supplies, and we did the water systems behind the well drillers. Well, my only thing that I really knew at that time was well drilling. Yeah. And I loved drilling wells. So in October of that same year, 1981, I was able to find a bank that would lend us the money to lease a rig. Now, mind you, back then it was 18% interest. So we got our first drill rig at 18% interest on a lease. My wife, Sue, was working in the front office of the hospital. I was drilling wells, and Harold was working at the pump store, and Virgil Hawkins. Most of you may remember Virgil. He was an awesome dude. We lost him several years ago now. So I started drilling wells out of the store there, and Harold and Virgil were in the store and doing the pumps. And unfortunately, it was really rough starting your own business and doing that. And a lot of you that have been there know what that's like. So the first few years, it was a really, really tough go. And Sue was working, like I say, at the hospital and saying, "Can you bring a paycheck home this month?" And I'm like, "No, honey, I can't. I'm barely keeping the lights on, and I couldn't take any pay." And our first daughter was born February of 1981. So we had a baby, and she was working at the hospital, not making much money. And then to make matters worse, and I didn't know it at the time, it took a while to figure it out. The gal that was working for us in the office apparently was helping herself to some of the money that was coming in from the drilling. And back then, a lot of the drilling we did, people were coming in and paying cash for it.
Yeah.
And so when my suppliers started calling and saying, you're way behind on your bills and we got a serious problem here. And I'm like, what? I had no idea. So we went on voluntary COD with everybody and paid a little bit towards the bills. And thank God, the pipe supplier, Horizon Pipe in Spokane, and the wire rope people down there were really good to carry us. If they'd have shut us down, we had no way to pay them. So it was, then I convinced my wife when I found out we had a problem in the office that she needed to quit her job and come to work down at the pump store.
Yeah.
And thank God she did. And from there, we started working our way out of the hole that we were in. And slowly but surely, we got out of that hole and started to grow the business and grew to the point where we are now, which is substantially larger than the three people that we had back in the day.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was quite the journey, to say the least, quite the journey.
Before we go on, do you care if I ask some questions? I got a few questions.
Yeah, okay. I'll try to baffle you with BS or something.
Okay. First, you mentioned at the original Fogle building where Cafe Italiano is now, you mentioned the Odd Fellows. What is that?
Yeah, it's kind of like an Elks organization or Eagles or whatever, and it was called the Odd Fellows. I it was closed when they had it, so I don't know if the Odd Fellows went defunct nationwide, or I don't know the history of what Odd Fellows, what that group is, if it's like a Knights of Pythias or something along those lines. Is all I know. Yeah,
to look into that, just out of curiosity.
Yeah, I'd share that with me when you find out.
Yeah. So then the move to where Country Chevy is now, was that move warranted because of growth? Had your grandfather grown the business to where you guys needed a bigger footprint?
The business had grown a lot. And actually, as I mentioned earlier, when Dave and I were doing car renovations, we had a detail shop. Dad had the detail shop where the Goodwill is, not where they're going to Clark's, but where they are currently located. Yeah. That was a dealership at one point, and Dad bought that, and all we did was renovate cars there. We detailed them, and we did camper work there for the RVs because he had the RV store. And over where Easy Knit is, that was a Ford dealership. And when Dad had bought the Ford dealership, because Ford and GM, back then at least, do not like to share the same building. Mm-hmm. And there was a big fight there, but apparently Dad and Grandpa that were in two different locations, they were doing all of their business licensing and everything under one location. So when they started to say, you can't have these together, and they said, well, we've been doing business under this one location, 151 West First, all these years. And, so they won that battle. And like I say, yes, it grew to the point. So they closed down the renovating and moved everything down to the new dealership at Southtown.
Okay. So I was doing a little research prior to this, and in the 1950s, there was 13 car dealerships.
Oh my God. Yeah, they were. Gas stations and car dealerships were everywhere.
What was supporting the industry at that time, do you think? I look at that right now and, just in my life, and, we have two car lots in town or whatever, but what were we doing economically in the 50s to support
Josh, and that is a really good question, because I wonder myself when I remember back, where Ager Furniture, which is Sandra's now, of course, that was a car dealership back in the day. Laird's had that. Where Sun Rental is, that was Newt Chevrolet and then Duvia Chevrolet. Where Habitat for Humanity is, and I'll have to remember to go back to that, because that was Cole Motors back in the day, and then Lynn Motors, and then LeDuc and Fogle ended up there after Carl Tyler. Those of you that may remember Carl, and Carl's done very, very well and moved to Missoula. Carl sold the Chevy store to Ken Waite, which is where Dave and I ended up with. But going back to your question, I often wonder, how could we support that many different car dealerships in this small community? And they all seem to make a living, so to speak.
Yeah.
And now, like you say, it's tough. And I'm a loyal and believe in trying to shop local, because I know how hard it is and how easy it is to buy now on Amazon or drive to Spokane or whatever. And it's a battle for those of us in small business to keep our people buying local, you know. And how they did it back then, I really don't know. I know my dad was very successful and that business grew. And I know most of the other dealerships we just talked about, you know, survived and made money and fed their families. So, and as they lost them, now some of them, like Ford, when they closed those points, they didn't feel the market areas were big enough. I don't know that you could go get a Ford dealer to come back in here. I don't know that Ford would allow it and some of those other things. But back then they did, you know, and of course Eldon Carter had the Carter Motors and they've been here for a long time.
Yeah.
And the Chevy store's been here for a long time. But when Ford was there, Tom Addis was in Chewelah. So we had a Ford dealer that was doing well in Chewelah and a Ford dealer in Colville, you know, 20 miles apart.
Wow.
So yeah, crazy.
It's incredible. You know, I think it's always easy to look back at history and, you know, fantasize about the good parts of it.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
And so I do that sometimes with being born and raised here in small town America you know, I drive down Main Street in Kettle Falls 3 or 4 times a day. And like, I fantasize or envision a time maybe was in the past, but I envision it in the future of where we own Main Street again, meaning local people that live here. And it seems like it is what it is, but we've almost become a nation of renters instead of owners. And I feel like the American dream that I was sold on growing up and through school was built on the premise of people being owners, you know, and being able to have that opportunity. And I look at it now and I don't know, it's, you know, you're rattling off all these car dealerships and you know the owners. You know, I don't know the owners of some of the businesses in my own community, you know, and I'm not trying to say good or bad or indifferent, just an observation, but I do think that there's value in small communities when you can own and then contribute, you know, would you agree with that there's value in that?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'm so happy that we have 4 children, 3 daughters and a son. And a couple of them went away, you know, went to school and got jobs and did different things. And now I'm very happy because we've got 8 grandkids that all of them have come back here and they recognize that. They know that this is where they want to raise their families. They don't want to be in Seattle. They don't want to be that. But yeah, that small town, good old boy, help your neighbor thing, that's what we grew up with.
Yeah.
And, you know, like Vaughan's is a well-known family that's been here forever. And, you know, I've needed things at times of stuff that they could help with and vice versa, that we could take a rig down there and drive a piling for them or do those kinds of things. And to know those people on a first name basis and see them at a bar and have a beer or whatever the case may be. We're starting to lose that, and that's unfortunate because, you know, being like you say, I'm rambling on talking about knowing these guys and the owners and the different things, and can call them at night and say, hey, I got a problem with it, you know. Well, Corey Fitzgerald at Chevy, you know, I'm getting ready to take my pickup and leave in a couple of days to drive on a longer trip, and I had an issue, and Corey like, yeah, I'll research that and I'll get right back to you know, that kind of thing, which is so nice, and like you say, when you start losing that, I hate to see that. I hate to see that.
Do you think we're losing it, or am I just maybe being, you know, a little over dramatic? Like, do you think it's substantially less, you know, when you were maybe my age and into your 50s, you know, do you think there was more small business ownership and camaraderie on that level?
I you know, and I hate to say yes, but I do, you know.
Yeah.
And a little backstory on that, as I mentioned earlier, the Fogle equipment business was located on the north side of Colville where Walmart is now. And when Walmart originally bought that, there were several property owners involved, and they came in not with a super center, they came in with one of their smaller stores. And they sent out a front man to buy these properties, and of course it was totally undisclosed who they were representing and this kind of thing. So you really didn't know who you were selling to. And they bought the first property, and they did well enough that they immediately wanted to expand it into the big store that it is now. Well, the Fogle family, still owned a good share of the property down there that they needed to expand to that super center. Well, they tried to come in under the, you don't know who we are, but we want to buy this property. And it's like, well, there's other property. Well, we have to buy this property. And it's like, okay, we know who you're representing, you know. And it was a struggle for me to know whether we really wanted to sell to them for the fear of what we're talking about now of the small businessmen. And I'm good friends with Ray Clark and Gary and the kids and all that. And worry about that, because the last thing that you want to do is cause something that's going to cause other local business people to go out of business. Mm-hmm. And there was letters to the editor and stuff in the local paper, and we really struggled with it. And part of me is like, should we or shouldn't we, agree to sell this property? Part of me, I knew a lot of people left to go to Spokane anyway. They were going to Spokane to buy whatever. And once you're down there, well, as long as we're here, the old mindset that, well, everything's cheaper down there because these little guys in Colville just can't compete, and they're going to, gouge you and charge more and all that kind of thing. So you get to Spokane, well, I got to go to Costco, but while I'm down here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go over here and here and here and here. So a part of me was trying to justify, well, maybe the Walmart will keep people from leaving town, and they'll fill in the here, here, and here, and here at Clark's and all the other places. And I know that Ray survived in spite of that. And I hope and pray that we didn't lose anybody to that Walmart thing. And obviously we eventually did sell to them. And I hope it was the right thing for the community. I know that obviously it's not like knowing the Sam Walton and I can call him up and say, hey, Sam, give me a break on something or whatever. But I hope overall, I know it's made us a hub. I know that a lot of people come from different areas to shop at Walmart because they don't have anything in Kettle or, all these other small areas. So hopefully when they come to Colville, they'll spend money at the other stores. Yeah. The bigger fish out there, in my opinion, is the Amazons of the world. Those are the things that's so easy, and I'm guilty like everybody, that it's pretty easy to just go to Amazon and buy now and free delivery and blah, blah, blah. And these brick and mortar guys have got to, compete with that. And that is a struggle. And I know some of them are really struggling. And I don't know an answer to that one. That's a really tough thing. My business being, you're not going to order a well on Amazon and have it delivered to your door, but it's a rough thing. And I don't know if that's the future or not.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. As far as the Walmart thing, because I'm in the Amazon generation, and I'm the same as you. Like, I'm guilty of it, but I don't love it. Yeah. But I do it. And, but thinking back, when I'd first asked about in the 50s here, it kind of seemed like we were booming, right? With all these different businesses, 13 car dealerships, et cetera. But then in that time period, that late 80s, early 90s, we are getting these super center stores. And to your point, in Spokane. And then you get like Costco, which is a one-stop shop, Kmart, Walmart, these things. And so that was here whether we liked it or not. And it does then create this opportunity for business to be done outside of this area, where I bet if we rewind to the 50s, you'd go to Spokane and it would cost you more to get that loaf of bread than it would to go to Main Street to get a loaf of bread, right? Exactly. Well, that's not true anymore. My loaf of bread at Costco is cheaper than what I can pay for the local gal's bread, who I love and support here at Harvest Foods. And so that, I think by habit, people will always be counting pennies. That's just human nature. It is. A lot of the times, and I think for most people, you got to go what's cost effective to make, you're raising families and doing things, and you got to make it work.
Everybody is on a budget and has, like you say, has to make it work. And there's times, it's funny how most of us have to look for the cheapest gas. You'll drive across town because they're 10 cents a gallon cheaper or whatever, and that's just human nature, I guess. Yeah. And we're all guilty of it. And some of them you have to, like you say, you're on a budget. And now, talked many times with people and the younger generations now, how in the world can you afford to buy a house, pay insurance, buy a car, and do all these things on any kind of a single household income of $50,000 a year, and you got a young family. I don't know how you could do it. I don't know how you could do it. It does not. It does not compute, and it's scary in a way. I don't know.
I think the most terrifying thing about it is the middle class becoming obsolete. And I feel that that's what built America in its prime was middle class America. And it seems like that starting to disappear is something that we should all be very nervous about and in tune with.
Yeah.
And I don't have the answer.
No, I don't either. I know. And when my employees come and they got problems, and I said, problems are pretty easy to identify, but we need to have some help with some solutions, you know. So I can see the problem, and so let's get our heads together and try to figure out some solutions. And that can be the hard part. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty easy to start pointing fingers at problems and things, but how the hell do you fix them? You know, and what can we do about that? So,
well, and it's a weird position we're in. So I don't know if you heard the podcast I did with a guy named Thomas Self. He's owns Waterloo Ranch, and he does the food truck that's at the farmer market.
I did see part of it. Yes. Okay.
So I was talking to his wife at the farmer's market 2 or 3 weekends ago, and we were talking about this, but on a different aspect of, you know, they're raising local beef in Rice, Washington, 30 minutes from here. Yep. And with no chemicals, you know, with no bullshit. It's literally pasture raised beef, using regenerative agriculture and, you know, how we used to eat beef 50 years ago.
Right.
It's not coming from a feedlot. It's healthy, if you will.
Yeah.
But he's got a lot of time and effort into that. And so his prices are premium prices.
Sure.
And so it's this weird conflict that we're in of we have a local business that's raising beef that then would love to be able to sell to the local residents, but then the local residents can't afford to purchase it. And so then you have a company that's selling their beef outside of the local footprint, and then you have locals that are eating beef from somewhere else that's probably got a bunch of shit in it that you don't want to be eating.
Exactly.
And I mean, that to me seems like a simple problem, I guess, with a very complex solution. You know, how cool would it be after we left here to be able to go to that meat market and grab, you know, 5 pounds of hamburger and 2 steaks for the same cost as it would be at Super One, you know? And I don't know if that'll ever change or not, but I'm hopeful.
I'm with you on that. I'm hopeful too. And, you know, talking about some of the things, and as we're talking, you know, things are coming back to my old brain too. One of the other conflicts that we went through here that I got roped into by my good friend Dick Bozine when they talked about doing a bypass of Colville. 395 is Main Street of Colville, and the traffic on Colville streets and stuff was getting so congested that they were serious the Department of Transportation for Washington was looking and talking about, let's do a bypass of the town. Well, all of us on Main Street businesses are like, we sell to those people that are driving by our businesses. Mm-hmm. So we don't really want to see that traffic go away. And that's a catch-22 there. You know, at what point does the traffic cost you business and blah, 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 blah. So there was a group called the Colville 2000 that was formed. And I ended up being, again, thanks to Dick Bozine, well, you got all these great ideas. Why don't you chair this thing? Well, this was supposed to be maybe a 1 or 2 year commitment as a group of citizens in Colville. George Tate and John Acorn, Dick Bozine, Sue Poe, Chuck Darst, Dennis Sweeney, Nancy Fogle, a good group of people that had some really good heads, and we're meeting on a weekly basis, meeting with the State Department of Transportation, meeting with city people, trying to figure out what we could come up with. And that's when the truck route was born, I'll say, and then the roundabouts. And we had some real concerns with roundabouts. They were really new and people weren't sure about them. Jeff Witten was very vocal about opposed with, you know, he had the station at the south end where the first roundabout went in and concerned what that was going to do to his business. Ray Clark was very concerned about how much traffic that was going to take off of Main Street. And we actually did a field trip because Newport at the time had a roundabout, and we wanted to, John Acorn and all of us, the whole committee jumped on a school bus and went over there and talked to the local businesses and watched it. And again, we were nervous about, this is pretty new in a little town of Colville. Is this roundabout thing, does that really work? And they're showing us the numbers of cars per hour that can go through a roundabout versus a signal light and the turn signals and the this and the that. All the math looked good. And the truck route itself made sense because at the time we had, I think, 1,100 trucks a day going through Main Street. And those guys are not trying to stop and buy furniture or sporting goods or anything. They're trying to get their load of logs delivered or whatever they're doing. If you can spin them off, get them off of Main Street, take the congestion off Main Street, so those that want to pull up in front of a store and go in and buy stuff, it seemed like it might make sense.
Yeah.
And we had lots of community meetings, which I floored and tried to answer these questions. Well, heck, I don't know the answers for sure. You know, we think we're doing the right thing. And now looking back, I feel good about that. I think we did do the right thing. And I think that truck route is working well. I think the roundabouts are working well. And at the time they had parallel parking on Main Street, and John Acorn was a big advocate of getting back to the diagonal parking, and which is back now, as you know. And I think it's flowing pretty good. And I think the Main Street businesses have done well because of that.
Yeah.
So again, I feel pretty good about that. And John Acorn, love him to death, and he's gone now. We were really good friends, and he had some really good ideas. And an old gentleman that's still with us, that's a very good friend, Ken Maycumber, he also got behind that stuff. Well, they'd come up with these great ideas that were going to cost a lot of money, one being the clock tower in the middle of town and all this stuff. And they said, we need to do this. Well, then they would get me because they knew that I was fairly good at going around and raising money from the community for some of these kinds of projects.
Yeah.
So the clock tower was born from that. We did a big raffle and did stuff. And then the cross on Colville Mountain is a big story that I got very involved with. That was put in originally, I think, in the 50s. And the JCs were involved with that. And you might have had relatives in that.
I think so.
I know I did.
Yeah.
And I know Ken Maycumber was involved with that and everything. And there was a second cross. I can't remember what happened to the first one, but the final one burned down. And that was back in the late 2000, late 90s, 2000, somewhere in there is when the last cross actually burned down. And Dwayne Scott was the mayor at the time. And of course, once we lost that cross, we still had the C, and those of us old timers, we wanted that cross back. So we immediately started saying, well, we've got funds and stuff ready. We can get this cross put back up. Well, unfortunately, the ACLU got involved and said, you cannot put a religious symbol on city property. And so those that know now that the cross is actually moved a little to the east, it's not directly over the sea anymore. And the backstory on that is there were some people, Scotty told me, well, because the city had logged a lot of that property up there, and he knew from the logging permits and stuff that there was some private property just east, and it was owned by some people by the name of Twitchell. So I started doing some research, and I found Mrs. Twitchell, and she lived out of the area, and her husband had passed. And I said, hey, this is who I am. This is what I'm trying to do. They had 4.5 acres up there. And I said, we want to buy this property. We want to put a cross back on Colville Mountain. And she said, well, I love what you're doing. I'm not in a position that I can give the property away. But I sure support your efforts to do what you're doing. So she gave me a price on the property. I agreed to buy it. I talked to Dwayne Bogan, said, Dwayne, there's some timber up here. Can you guys go up there and take a look and see what you can get off timber? He gave me a number for the timber that helped pay for the property. Sue and I bought the property. Then I had a bunch of old well casing that we welded together and made the new cross, and we had tons and tons of local help. Mike Ressa, Sun Rental, Boise Cascade. I mean, just about every business up and down the street were there to help us with this thing. So we built that thing at my shop down on the south end of Colville and had a little windstorm to finish the rest of the trees that were obscuring where the new cross was. And John Acorn was very involved in this, as was Ken Maycumber. And we built that cross, and we went up and put it back up on Colville Mountain. And the first time we just got it done, and the first time we didn't have the power up there yet, Floner Electric was very involved in getting it lit, was 911. When that cross was done, and Kenny and John rented, didn't rent, Sun Rental donated the use of a generator, and they went up there with floodlights and lit that cross for the first time that night.
That gives a guy goosebumps.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
It was cool. It was one of those things that, and I'm not a super religious sort of guy, but everything fell together with that. When we were taking that cross in two pieces behind a trailer from my store and went up Main Street, and of course we're way over length and all those things, but the local police, they turned their head. And the road going up there to the cross is a switchback road for those of you that haven't been up there. And how that thing it just barely made it around each of those corners. And then when we got up there, we had dug holes and put larger pipe to, slide them in together. We had a big grade-all thing from Sun Rental to lift that cross. And when we got it all built together on the ground and painted and the boards across it, and we're lifting it up, and we had about 1 inch that it lifted it high enough to put it over those two pipes that we set in the ground to slide in there.
Wow.
It was like everything, because we weren't engineers. We didn't have a clue what we were doing. We rednecked the whole thing.
That'll
work. That looks good to me. Okay.
Yep.
And so, like I say, when it came together, you kind of look up and say, by God, he's looking over us on this one and helped us get the thing done. So that's
incredible.
That was awesome.
I remember bits and pieces of that. I was young. This is 20 plus years ago.
We all were one day, Josh.
Yeah. But I never knew the full story. I mean, that was fascinating. I appreciate you sharing that. I didn't know all the dynamics that went into that.
It was really a community effort, and it's really cool now to look up there and see that when you get to Addie or wherever you can see that and kind of says, hey, I'm home. There's the cross up on the hill. So yeah,
it's, and I don't mean to keep being a Debbie Downer off of these topics, because I love it. I mean, it gets me excited. But what you just shared in Colville, I'm familiar with in Kettle with AV Brothers building the pool, and Happy Dale and the skate park and these different things that have been built here. But man, it seems like it's been 20 years. I'm looking around and looking at my peers and looking in the mirror at myself and saying, what are we doing to add, this community buy-in, this pride and ownership of this place built us and it's now going to build our kids? What are we doing to give back? And it's something that I've wrestled with for quite a while. And I've dabbled in it a little bit and been discouraged. And then I've taken a shitty attitude of just kind of whatever with it. It was, I remember here about 4 years ago, I got really involved with school safety at Kettle Falls. It was right after Uvalde, Texas had happened. And it just seemed like that was, for whatever reason, for me personally, it was a needle that broke my back, in the sense of what are we doing here locally to protect our kids? And I had a bunch of questions that I didn't have answers to.
Sure.
So I just started attending school board meetings, asking questions, and learning what the problems were, but then also trying to be part of a solution, not just doing this,
right.
And, but in the infancy, I've always believed in checks and balances and power and numbers. Like I get that from a very basic perspective, and I think it works when done right. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to form a committee and I was starting with just dads that I knew, to say, hey, we should go to these school board meetings, and not with malice intent, but just for checks and balances. One, we should be educated, because I didn't know anything. I've got daughters that are 13 that I've never been to a school board meeting. So that's on me,
Right.
And then two, if there's something that we think is less than desirable, we should try to come up with an action plan to fix that.
100%.
And so I handpicked 6 guys and brought them in. Miller let me use a shop for the night. He's got a nice island over there and chairs, and, got some dinner and drinks. And I had a little itinerary that I typed out for everyone. And I really sold, because at that point I'd learned that we weren't doing everything we could be doing.
Sure.
And so I kind of highlighted what I thought was the low-hanging fruit, and then the big issue things, and then with a plan to be able to move forward with that. And it was one of those things where everyone's like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Let's do this. And I said, okay, well, let's have a follow-up meeting in 2 weeks. And then, we'll start to take action. Not one guy showed up. Not one person. and I thought for sure, I was like, this is school. This is your children.
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
even, you don't have to debate that. It's not a Republican versus Democrat. It's just like,
there's no politics.
There's no politics. We agree on this. And I remember being so disheartened and then angry at the time of saying, if we can't do that, what can we do? If we don't have community buy-in and numbers in that, I'm not going to talk about a water park or anything. Like that seems first and foremost. And ultimately, I can't say enough good about, how the school came together. I had so much local community help. There was this really cool effort and school safety at Kettle Falls. And now I think subsequently Colville, Chewelah, there's these other areas. They have student resource officers now. We have single point entries. We have security cameras. We do these, active shooter drills annually. Mm-hmm. And it's come so far. And that was a group effort and it was huge. But when you say Colville 2000 and you list, and I know most of those guys that you've listed, like I said, I'm sitting a little discouraged going, I couldn't get 6 on school safety, and you guys are, and your work was very meaningful as well. But I feel this need in me to be able to lead my peers to say, guys, our kids are being raised here. What are we doing to leave our mark and make it better than we found it? That was something that I mentioned, I think in the Miller podcast, but that was something growing up. And, you said that you and Dwayne have helped each other out. Like we always went to Larry Lickfold's shop if we needed, anything, whether it was a tractor or it was a roto drill. But Dad always taught me you bring that back better than you found it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that same principle to me needs to happen here, and I'm guilty. I'm not on the school board, I'm not on City Hall. I'm not doing those things, but also it feels a little discouraging at times, kind of being a one-man show. So
truthfully,
can you speak to any of that?
I'm really glad that you kind of recognize that, because at my era now, sometimes I look back and think we have somehow failed my era of people, because, Kiwanis, Rotary, Elks, Eagles, all of those organizations were really going strong, and a lot of them have just turned into a drinking club or disbanded or whatever, because the next generation, you being part of that, for some reason, we didn't get that baton passed or something's changed. And I see that. I mean, you talk about the school board. My wife served 12 years on the school board. She's served a number of years on the hospital board. I served many, many years on the Chamber of Commerce. I chaired the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation locally a couple of years and served on the committee for many, many years. The Safari Club International and those different things. And there's so many, and my kids can be guilty of this too, that they haven't joined some of those clubs. They haven't done anything like that. The Colville 2000s, like we talk about, and these fundraisers we've done, the fair support, all of that stuff that was done, back to the name of your podcast here, the Grange, those kind of days. And I wasn't a Grange Hall guy, but, like you say, being the local rural stuff, that's what everybody did. And now I don't know if they're just too busy with their technology, sitting on their iPads playing war games, or I don't know the answer. But I truthfully feel like, God, how come our kids didn't take this on? all the baseball trips. My kids were in sports, and we did all and I think the sporting side of stuff still has some pretty good support. I know a lot of us local businesses, we endorse these teams, we pay sponsorship monies and all that kind of stuff, and the fair, that we all contribute. And again, folks, that's one reason to try to support your local guys, because so much of the money that comes in our front doors
goes right back,
goes out our back doors to pay for this kid's stuff and all of these things. It goes on and on and on, and you don't get that from Costco or Amazon or this kind of thing. So, I know most of the business people around town, and I know they all share the same philosophy I do. I was raised here. I love this area. I'm going to die here. Well, I'll be buried here. I don't know if I'll die here. I'll die on some safari somewhere. But anyway, and I don't know. We seem to be losing it a little bit, Josh.
So I got to be careful to not be victim here. But in my personal experience, because I've dabbled a little bit, local Rotary here. I've been to city council meetings now. I had this switch 5 years ago where I just said, I was very critical of everything and everyone. And I don't know, it was when I hit 30 or what happened, but I just said, dude, you got to go actually be part of a solution. Don't just sit and bitch at everything. And I was very guilty of that for a long time, and pretending that I knew the answers and then being very critical of things that I didn't agree with. And so I've dabbled around in that a little bit, checking out Rotary, the City Hall. I went to quite a few candidate nights last fall because I wanted to be an informed voter. I've always voted. I take pride in voting.
Good for you, and I believe you should. Otherwise, you can't bitch, in my opinion.
I agree.
If
100%.
you don't vote, don't bitch.
And so I'll read the voters pamphlet. I'll ask people that I respect, and kind of, I try to cast an intelligent vote, right? But I've never been to candidates nights or heard debates or anything. Like I said, I got to be careful to not play victim, but it's not a welcoming environment for a 36-year-old guy that's hungry, that's used to getting shit done. What I mean by that, the candidate nights, I'm the youngest guy there by 30 years, and it's kind of a snooze fest. And the topics are these boilerplate, we're yelling at each other over abortion and the border on Mexico when I'm saying, let's talk about Stevens County. So you lose me instantly on that one.
Right.
And it's just these like boilerplate on the political side. It's these boilerplate issues that we've debated since the beginning of time. Yeah. And we will continue to debate.
And we'll continue, yeah.
But I have a list of things locally that I think we should talk about, for sure.
Let's take care of our own first,
you know. And then the other thing, when you start looking at chamber or Rotary or whatnot, it almost seems like a lot of that is approached again with guys, or not guys, but with members that are older again, anywhere from 15 to 30 years older. And I'm not faulting anyone, but it's almost this mindset of, why can't we do this? And that's hard, and I think it's valid on a degree because we have way more red tape. And I'm sure you see that in your business today than you did in 1981 on day one, right?
Yes, sir.
All the things that you need to be compliant with. And then you add state of Washington and, all of these things that I don't know if they're necessary or not. Some of them feel unnecessary, but
and some of them are.
That's a different debate. But it does seem like we find all these reasons why we can't do stuff. And I battled that the first year with the school safety thing. Can't do this, can't do that. You start researching, you find the gray area, you find these different things where, no, you can. You just got to find a way to do it,
And I think you're right. I think, some of the people are older and it's just like, well, they're just there because they want to mark that on their sheet that, I participated in this for X number of years. And this is the way we've always done it. Well, I don't want to hear about what's wrong with what we got. And so, how you get by that, I don't know. Maybe we should have term limits on that stuff like we should have on some of our political stuff. But I could see from your point of view where it could be hard stepping into that when you got the quote old guard that really aren't doing anything anymore. They're just there.
I think it's a social thing, especially at the city council meetings I went to. It was, people just needed to be heard, but moving the needle wasn't happening.
Exactly.
And so then it's hard to say, to your other point of, running a business, I'm raising a family and I'm taking, 2 hours out of my Thursday night. If I'm going to do that, have no problem, but it better move the needle, right? It better just not.
I don't do this to waste my time, folks. I got other things I could be doing.
If we're all just going to sit and talk about stuff, well, we can plan that for a different time. But,
and you're used to moving the needle, as am I, and stuff. So when you get into that, where you can see this is just going to be another chat session. The heck with that. I don't, sorry, I'm moving on.
And so I don't know how to change that, but your words were pass the baton. And I think I think it's on my generation for not seeking it and being even on the track.
Right.
But then also I think you got to look around and say, why is there no one to hand it to? And I think that there's two pieces to that. Cause I've felt frustration in that of like, I'm ready to go if it's something I believe in and whatever, but I haven't no one's reached out to me to say, hey, this is what I think we need done. And you'd be a great fit in that.
See, and I was recruited on those different things, the chamber thing. Marty Dubel came to me and said, Rod, you ought to get involved in this. And I'm like, oh, Marty, I'm busy with all this other stuff. I don't really, but he sold me on it and I was active in it, back in the day. And the same with the Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation and these other things. People did say, here's a baton, here, why don't you go do something with it? So
that's interesting.
Yeah. So I was recruited, and somebody needs to be recruiting you right now for some of these things. I can tell.
Yeah. Well, I hope, and that's hopefully the value in these conversations is that, maybe there is someone listening or whatever. I don't ever want to make this a political podcast, but I am very eager for the day to start talking to our local elected political leaders and having conversations in this platform. Because I think we need to know, we can't, you and I can't make a difference in DC, but we can here locally. And I think people have forgotten that for whatever reason. I've been a little bit discouraged. I reached out to a couple local candidates that were elected, and I've been treated very well by them with good intent of, we'd love to come on the podcast, but they haven't been on the podcast yet. And I'm just saying, I want grassroots, transparent conversation. I want to learn about the system. Tell me, I don't know what your job is. Let's just talk about it. And I think we're so worried about being at the end of a barrel, and I can resonate with them of, okay, I'm coming on this guy's podcast that I don't really know. And what if he puts me in a corner and a gun to my head? And so that's why I've built this last year of just trying to build trust, to say, hey, that's not what I'm about, but let's have honest discourse, because that's the only thing that then will get people, I think, to then band together to do something, to move a needle. I think that we're just okay having our head in the sand a little bit.
And you make a good point there. It makes me think of back in the Colville 2000 days, and we raised over $12 million in grants. And
did you really?
Things. Yeah.
Wow.
So it was a big deal. We had some good grant writers, et cetera. But I do remember Al Sampson coming to me one day saying, Rod, I thought you had better sense than this. Some of what was being done was the beautification of Wynn Street and the bulb outs on the pedestrian crossings and the really nice street lights on that particular street and stuff. And he says, why in the world are you not taking that money and putting it to fix this street or do this or do that? Well, that's where the backside comes in on some of this stuff, going back to like politicians having to do some of this stuff. We had grants that money had to be spent on certain things, the tree city, the benches, the street lights, the different things. So if we could have taken that money and say, you know what, we need to repave this street versus a new sidewalk over here. This one's still okay, but our hands were tied. The money was there, and we were able to leverage that money and use it. We had to use it on stuff that would kind of go, really? Is that really the best place to put that? Well, no, it probably wasn't, but we got that money and we might as well use it in our local area. It cost us $1. We raised $12 for every dollar we spent locally in taxes and whatever. So it was a really good bang for your buck, but sometimes there is a backstory of why are you doing that? Well, I didn't want to do it that way, but that's the way we had to do it. And you want to throw the money away, or do you want to use it and have some really nice bulb outs and lights on this street?
And I think there's a ton of understanding through transparency. And I think that we're lacking a lot of transparency right now. And so when we're not transparent, it almost builds a silo, and then human nature is to assume the worst. I always, people almost always assume the worst than the best. And, I remember when, and I'm sure it still is, but like Colville homeless was a big issue. And so I just thought, I'm going to learn more about this. And I actually went and talked to the chief of police, and then, talked to county guys and whatever. And I learned a ton about what that encampment was. And, that basically was there so they weren't at Yep Cannon Park where your kids are. And you can agree or disagree with it. But once I understood it, and then, there was a Supreme Court ruling that was still being done, that was changing that daily. And so the point I'm trying to make is the average guy doesn't know that. You just drive around, see the encampment, kind of see what's going on there.
Assume the worst.
And then you assume the worst. And I'm going, man, I would love to be able to have the dialogue that I just had, with those few people. And so then everyone else can hear and then form their opinion. And say, would you rather have it there, or would you rather have it at Yep Cannon Park? And then understand the RCW and the Supreme Court ruling and I didn't agree with all of it, but it gave me a better understanding. And then I could,
you don't have to agree with it. Then, like you say, you got a better understanding why they had to do it. You don't like the reason that they had to do it, but being put in those shoes,
understanding the why was huge.
It was probably like, well, now I can see it. I don't like it.
Your hands tied, your hands tied,
and so here we are.
Yeah, for sure.
There's so many things that are that way too that we don't know. Like you say, you just look at something and you go, Jesus, really? And then you get the backstory and went, oh, well, now it kind of makes sense. I still don't like it, but yeah, I see why you did it.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I can be Debbie Downer, but I also have a tremendous amount of optimism that we can start changing too. And I really look forward to working with, folks of your generation and then also banding together with mine, because I feel a shift, as far as with guys and gals, with people my age, of getting hungry again. I think they're looking around and saying, okay, we've had it good for a long time, and it feels kind of bad for everyone on a sense. Everyone's bills are going up. We got all these things going on in the world. Has that been true forever? Yes. But I think that my generation's feeling it. And I see different changes in lifestyle. I've seen good friends of mine break 3 generations worth of habits, and say, this stops with me. I'm not going to continue to live like this. And I get excited about that.
That's awesome.
Like that's a start. And I hope and am optimistic about the snowball effect that can go from that.
It can be infectious,
really.
So that's and somebody's got to start that, and you've got the fire in your belly. I can tell.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So we'll see. But to go back real quick, I had a few more. This is how I go. I go all over the place. But
right. So do I.
How long did Fogies last?
That would have been, like say, it burned down in 81, but it had changed, and it had only been A.G. Murphy's for.
But like in your ownership, how long?
My ownership would have been like 1978 to 1980, maybe early 81. So just over 2 years.
Are you even, how old are you then? You're 18 to 21?
I was 21 when Sue and I got married, and I just had been in the Fogies for a little bit, so 20-ish when I got in it.
I can't even fathom that. I'm trying to think of 20-year-old Josh owning a disco bar.
Yeah. What could go wrong? What could go wrong, right? Newly married, new child, and a discotheque. Yeah.
Was it ever a hit? Like, were you guys, was it good?
It really was, you know, Josh. It was unbelievable, the crowds we had and stuff, but the problem was none of us were restaurant managers, and we had a bartender and his girlfriend from Vegas that came up and were running it. Well, every dollar that came in, they got like 90 cents of it.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of money coming in, but we weren't able to pay our food bill.
For sure.
And they weren't getting the drinks out. I can remember people, I won't name them, Harry, but that would come in the back door with their own bottle because they could never get a drink,
Yep.
And so they could come in like you do Acorns, where you can come in the backside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Fogies had that back entrance too.
Okay.
So you take a back table, you're sitting down there, you're having a great time,
Yep.
but you're not,
no money's leaving your pocket.
Yeah, no money's leaving your pocket. You're just dancing to the YMCA and having a big day.
Yeah. I bet that was quite the change, though, for that time period to bring a disco movement in.
It really was.
I mean, that's incredible. I mean, it'd be similar today. Like there's a lot of guys that are into techno music and dance raves, that are my age, and that'd be funny to see that come up.
It would. It would. It was a big hit. Those that are still here will remember it, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's incredible. So then after that, you transition and you buy from Bargain Bill, right?
I bought from Harold Roeder. It was
okay. Bargain
Bill had started Bargain Warehouse, but at the time, Harold Roeder and his nephew owned it.
And so did you, when you were working for KC while you were at the racetrack, did you enjoy the drilling aspect?
I loved it.
What was it about that
I loved
struck a chord with you?
Well, one bit, when we were raised, we lived in the city of Colville up on 105 Crestview Drive next to a lot of the local business people, Haney's, Agers, etc. But Dad bought a farm in 1969, and we moved out there when I was 13 years old and got raised on the farm. So being out in the rural setting, but to go out and drill wells and to go, meet new people, be outside. Sure, there was days that it was colder than hell, like they say, colder than a well digger's butt kind of thing. But to go out there, meet people, learn the country around here, and the most gratifying thing in the world is to be drilling and get that water And you know it as a driller a lot of times before you're seeing it. You can tell by the way the drill's turning and everything. And you're going, oh, I just hit water. And then a lot of time the customer's standing there watching and said, hey, come over here. We're going to have really, 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 you know, and to have that water come gushing out of the well as you're drilling it, there's nothing better than that feeling to say you're going to have the water to build your forever house or whatever it is. And
that's cool.
And yeah, to this, in fact, when the company grew to the point where I wasn't out in the field drilling anymore, I don't like desk jobs. I don't like being in the office. I would in fact, I started doing a good share of our hydrofracturing that we've gotten into for the last number of years. And I will go out with John Payne, who's been with us forever and a super good guy. And anyway, John and I did 99% of the fracking up until John still does most of it. And he hasn't had me out with him much this year, but I still enjoy that to this day.
That's great.
Getting out there doing that. It's just, I just love it. I wish every darn well we drilled could be, 100 feet deep and 10 gallons a minute. There's nothing worse than going out there and drilling a deep well. You're taking the people's savings and you're not finding the water. And I mean, that's horrible. That's horrible.
Yeah. That's tough.
It's tough. It's really tough. It's a tough business, and being in the car business, you could come in and say, Rod, I want to buy a new pickup. I want this and I want this and I want this. And I could say, Josh, it's going to be $52,000 out the door. Here it is. Do you have it or don't you have it? We can finance it, blah, blah, blah. But you come in to get a well drilled and say, well, is it going to be 5,000 or is it going to be 50,000? And you're like, well, I got 5,000, but I don't have 50.
Yeah.
And that's a really, really hard thing. I just wish that there was, you'd think if we could put a man on the moon, that we could have ways
technology to see.
That we would be able, and we've tried so many different things, including, the water witching and the seismograph and the satellites and everything, and I've yet to find anything that 100% you can say, by God, this is it. We know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part of the well drilling business.
I bet.
But the rest of it is so gratifying and it's fun now. And I think I spoke to you the other day when we talked about doing this that Sue and I have decided that we're going to turn our company into an ESOP, which is an employee-owned business. So that is happening as we speak, and our employees have been well aware of this for the last 5 years. 49% of our company is going to be owned by the employees. And our daughter, Elena, that's working here in Colville, and our son, Robert, that's working in Deer Park, will be the other 51% of the company. So that's our transition. We're excited about that. We've got really good employees, obviously, to make it. There's not too many well drilling companies around that have been in the business for almost 45 years.
Yeah.
And it's because of the people that we have. And, I like to think the work ethics that we have and the honesty that we have and the care that we have. But, we got such good people and they care about it. And Sue and I wanted to reward them and make it their company.
Can you break it down just to like I'm a fourth grader? Very simple of the employee owned part of that. Like how do the employees own stock in the company?
It's a corporation. And then there's a formula that, this is all government regulated, of course. And the company funds based on profitability and the amount of payroll and stuff. You put this money into a trust account. It's actually a trust account for the employees. And then when you finally pull the trigger to make it the ESOP, whatever money, first they value the company, and then so they got a 49% of whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then the money that's in that trust is used to buy stock, and then those employees get actual stock in the company that they can sell at retirement or even before. Once they've been there, I think it's 5 years, they're vested and that kind of thing. So it becomes a retirement for them, but it is actual stock that they own in the company.
And then the other good part of that is you get people that are so bought in. When you actually own something, you treat it like you own it, probably.
Well, that's what you want. You want them to treat your customer like they're your customer, which they are. Mm-hmm. And you want them to treat that piece of equipment like it's yours because it is. And, if you see somebody else drop something, you will pick it up and not just go, oh, I didn't drop it, I'm not going to do it, or, this kind of thing. And that's what we're trying to build. And, not that we don't have that to a large degree already, but this hopefully will make them,
that.
Everybody can feel it by their back pocket. Mm-hmm. What's it going to do for me? And at the end of the day, can I feed my family? Can I go buy a new truck or whatever?
Yeah.
That's bottom line is bottom line.
Absolutely.
And we recognize that.
That's incredible. Good for you guys. I mean, that's what a great opportunity. And I'm sure that feels good on the way out, being able to.
It does, you know. 'Cause
that didn't happen overnight
No,
to be able to
it
be in a
didn't.
position to do that.
Yeah, it's taken a long time and to research it. And actually a big company that's one of our suppliers called Preferred Pump, and they do $800 million a year in sales. Obviously, we're nothing anywhere close to anything like that. But Randy Lyon's the owner of that company, and he went 100% employee owned. And I know Randy pretty well through the years. We've done different things together, and I know his employees because they call on us and supply us. So I talked to Randy to say, how did it work for you as the owner? And he loves it. He feels good about it. And then I talked to the employees and said, how's this working for you as an employee? Are you liking this? Is this working? And every single one of them were all smiles and said,
Really?
yeah, this, we like this. So, you know, obviously we wouldn't do it if we didn't think it was going to be a good thing, for a win-win, as we like to say, for everybody. And hopefully a win for our customer too, that the company will be there for another 45 years. You know, you walk in there now and we've got all the records. People say, well, I think Rod drilled this well in 1977, you know, and we can pull it up and I'll go, yeah, and my memory's failing, but there's still a lot of them that go, yeah, I remember that well. Oh yeah, I know this and that and whatever. And it's good. It makes you feel good when you can do that.
That's really cool. Was your dad brought into the car business like out of high school, you know, with your grandfather?
Pretty much. He served in the Coast Guard for a stint, and then worked in the family business for all of his working career. To my knowledge, he never had any other jobs per se, like say the Coast Guard thing. And
so your kids are essentially fourth generation, right?
Yeah,
of business,
of Colville business.
Colville business. Yeah. That's incredible. Do you think some of that, like, do you believe that some of that's in your blood, you know, generationally? Like,
I think it is.
Does that get passed down a little bit?
I think it is, yeah.
I mean, because as I got to imagine as a young kid, that business was in you, right? You're probably, you're at the dealership and starting at the very basic level and working your way up.
Absolutely, where I knew I was destined to go, and it wasn't because it was expected of me. That's what I wanted to do, you know? I mean, I really was planning on it. I was really planning on it. In fact, I guess I didn't finish that part of the story because got in the well drilling business in 1981. 1990, I get a call from Chevrolet saying, hey, Ken Waite was the Chevrolet dealer in Colville at the time. He had bought from Carl Tyler, and Ken was struggling, not making it. And they said, we are looking to have somebody come take over this Chevrolet dealership in Colville. And one, I don't know why they would even think of me. I'm a well driller. What little car experience I had was a teenager washing cars and renovating cars, etc.
Yeah.
My first feel was absolutely not. One, my family was a Ford dealer, so I'm a brand loyal guy. Everything I've got is Ford, and Chevy was always crap, you know, kind of thing. You know, that's the mindset you have. Yeah. And so then I started thinking about it a little bit. And again, we're 9 years into the drilling business, which I'm loving. But Dave LeDuc, who I had mentioned earlier, his dad, Glenn, had been running the equipment company. Well, now Dave is running the equipment company for the Fogle family, which is myself, my brother, my two sisters. But he had a lot of car experience, and Dave's a born salesman. You know, he can sell ice to the Eskimo sort of guy. So I said, hey, Dave, what would you think about going in partners with me and us buying the Chevrolet store? He's like, what? He says, I don't have any money. I said, well, I don't really either, but it doesn't sound like we're going to need any. And literally, after I talked to him and said, he agreed that, okay, let's look at this and see what we can do. And he had some equity in his house because we needed a flooring line and, you know, buying some parts. But literally at the closing, we literally gave Ken Waite $1 for the Ken Waite name. But to go along with that at the time, Dave was running the Fogle family equipment business. I said, I don't feel good about taking the manager from my brother and sisters to go into this car business. We probably ought to look. I know that they don't really want to stay in the equipment business anyway. They're only doing it because of your dad and you. So we probably ought to talk to them and see about maybe taking them out of this. So that's what we did. And so we had the equipment store. Dave and I bought it and turned it into LeDuc and Fogle, and he was the manager. I stayed in the drilling part of it. And so that was, I think, 1990. And we had the car business, and we were in the old Habitat for Humanity building, which is, right across from Safeway there on the corner, which is closed now. But that was the car dealership.
Really?
And so we were renting that. It was from Cole. Doug Cole owned the building because it was Cole Motors back in the day, and his family still had the property. And we still, once the Ford dealership was sold down in Southtown where Chevrolet is now, Country Chevrolet, the Fogle family continued to own that building, and we were leasing it out to Avista was in the back part of it, and Frank Setti was in the front of it selling motorcycles and chainsaws and stuff. Well, when the lease came up, we didn't renew their lease. We moved from the Cole Motor building down to the Country Chevrolet building and moved Leduc and Fogle Motors back into there, which did my heart a lot of good because I worked in there, like I say, for my dad when that was getting built, and just so to get back in there.
That's a full circle deal.
And run that car dealership from the building that my dad built to be a car dealership. So, it all evolved into my life has been really strange.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of different curveballs thrown at me.
No doubt. Do you mind just speaking real quick on partnerships? There's always, it seems like, two trains of thought on that. And some people will say avoid them like the plague, and the other side will say it's the best thing I ever did. But do you mind just giving your 2 cents on partnerships and business?
Well, and I've been in a number of them, as you can tell from my conversation. The one starting out as a teenager with Tom Beardsley in the racetrack. And Tom and I get along great. We were not a good partnership.
Yeah.
When his brother Steve took over, however, Steve and I did really well together and worked well together and complemented each other. So there was no problem there. The next partnership being Bible, Fogle, and Kane. That was a train wreck. It didn't work out good at all. Like I say, Kane went broke, Bible killed himself, and it was not a good situation. And for me, I had no money, and I'm just working, like I say, drilling wells, trying to run a bar. So that was a train wreck. Then Dave Leduc came along, and Dave and I partnered up. That was always a labor of love. We got along great. He was my best man in my wedding.
Wow.
And to this day, we're like brothers.
Yeah.
And so that partnership worked well. I trusted him with everything and vice versa. And so that worked really, really well.
So the trust piece is huge in partnerships.
Yes, absolutely.
That's got to be legit.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then Dave and I sold a portion of the company. We brought in Tony Booth when Tony came to town.
Mm-hmm.
And that partnership was a kind of a bumpy road. Tony and I have got a lot of the same strengths together. So, Dave and I fed off what I was strong in, Dave was weak in, and vice versa kind of thing. And Tony and I were a lot alike, and we're good friends. And it wasn't a train wreck by any means. It worked fine for me, and it worked well for Tony, and he's done super, super well. So to just say overall partnerships are wonderful, no, I can't say that. Yep. The right ones are. Yeah. The right ones. It takes the right people.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And then I'm also curious too about, we've kind of left off from 1981. You purchased the business, you got some dark months, dollars and cents. You got a wife and a new mother saying, you're going to bring some money home one of these days. How long are you willing to be in the shit? When do you know to say this isn't meant for me? Were those thoughts ever in your head, or were you always just a determined guy and you knew that you were going to make that work?
More the latter. More, I was a determined guy. I knew I was working hard. I knew that we were building a business. I knew people were coming to us because they wanted me at the time to drill their well and that kind of thing. So I knew that the potential was there. And thankfully our creditors, as I said earlier, worked with us when we couldn't pay our bills. And I'm really good friends with most of them now. Yeah. Had they pulled the plug on us, we would have crashed and burned, and it would have been over. But it was a labor of love. And then as long as a bank would lend me more money, I would go buy another drill rig. And as long as if I had more work than I could do with one rig, I bought another rig, and I bought another rig, and got up to 10 rigs at one point. And that was when just more, I just wanted to do everything. And now that's in my rearview mirror now.
Yeah.
But
do you think a lot of the the customer relationship that you probably learned, from your dad and your grandfather, customer service in the car business, was a lot of that transferable in building your wheel drilling business?
I think so. One of the things that makes me think of a customer that I went and met to sign him up for a well over in the Ione area. And she had heard things back in the day. There was a term that went around, I've been Fogleized. And that was from the car business days. And, you went and bought a new car from Bob Fogle or Rod Fogle or whatever, and you got Fogleized.
Gotcha.
Well, I always took that as a positive thing.
That was a good thing.
I didn't think that was a bad thing. And I mean, in her mind, she was like, well, but I don't want to get Fogleized, meaning I'm getting screwed on this deal and stuff. And I said, well, that stems way back from the car days and stuff. And I said, truthfully, I thought that was a good term. I know I'm not here to do that to you. Yeah. And if Fogleizing you means going out and drilling your well and getting you good water, I'll take that. But if it means I'm going to, do something other than that. So it's kind of funny. So yes, I do think that some of that came over from, the car business days. And I've had a lot of the old timers, Pat Graham, who just passed away not long ago, that was good friends of Dad's, and people that talked about, how he was to work with, and how my grandpa was a hard-headed, cantankerous old fart. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But I think he was a darn good mechanic, and I think he was an honest guy.
Yep.
And, my dad the same. So
yeah,
I think
those are good traits to have in business.
Yeah. I mean, take, do unto others as you want done unto yourself. And that's what I've told my people too. Treat that person the way you want to be treated. It really doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
Absolutely.
It's pretty simple if you get down to it.
Yeah. So then you guys have seen, over your career, what I would say is a tremendous amount of growth, starting with one truck to where you are present day. Was that growth, was a lot of it just like you grew in the early days of one truck, able to get financing for truck number 2? Was it kind of a small growth to get to where you are sitting here today? Or, I guess, would you just touch on the growth that you've experienced in your career?
And it was for many of the years, again, starting in 1981, literally every year was our best year up until about 2006. And when 2006, 7, and 8 was a huge downturn. And, we had built the company at that point that we had 3 locations, and we were losing a lot of money. And thankfully we'd been there long enough that we had banked some money, but we were going through it pretty quick. And my crystal ball's pretty foggy a lot of the times. And that downturn, no idea how long it was going to last, because over the years you have those little peaks and valleys, Yeah. And a lot of times they're pretty short term. That was a pretty long one. And it was getting to the point that it was like, okay, we have got to, we got to close Republic. We got to close Spokane. We got to pull our horns in. We got to just concentrate on Colville and save the ship, and then 2009, it started coming back. So yeah, it was a slow growth from 81 up until, like I say, 2006-ish. And then it was a big crash. And then it's been a slow recovery. And the odd thing is, the COVID, who would have ever thought the COVID thing that we all went through was even possible in this world?
Yeah.
And my God, it was a worldwide thing. But in the drilling business, it was crazy. We were backed up more than we've ever been backed up in the 40 plus years that we've been in business. And I think what was going on, a lot of businesses allowed their people to work from home.
Yeah.
And so people didn't want to live in Seattle or LA or New York. They wanted to live in Stevens County or Farron County or Ponderay County. They were coming here, buying their properties, working from home, and putting in their water systems. So those couple of years of COVID, it was cocoa nuts. I mean, I'm thinking the world's coming to an end, and the next thing is, and it wasn't just us. It wasn't because we're the most fabulous people in the world. Everybody in our business was like, holy crap, what's going on? So I would have totally missed that one. We thought the sky is falling.
So not to ask a dumb question, but does the housing crash of 2008 and, what you just shared, those 3 years from 06 through 08 were tough years. And so I've got to imagine, prior to that, 04, 05, you got to be feeling fairly confident of you have multiple locations, business is good, you're growing. And then you start to see that valley that just keeps getting deeper and deeper. And what a change of, I mean, being a business owner and being the guy, that's a tremendous amount of emotion that goes with that too. I can imagine, of feeling that you have it made on one hand, knowing that in business you never fully have it made. But then on the other hand, you're starting to see this downturn. Does that experience ever like keep you up at night in business? Meaning that you saw how dark and deep that can be. Do you ever get to a point in business where you're thinking, I kind of got this figured out? Or is that just part of owning a business? That
100%. That happens a lot. It happens to this day.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, just getting things on your mind, worry about things, some of it can be worry. Some of it can be, job related stuff, equipment issues, employee issues, customer issues, or whatever. Yeah. If you don't take that home with you, and I wish you didn't have to, because my wife a lot of times is like, Jesus, you got to just quit thinking about that stuff. I'm one of those guys that can't, if we've got a job that's gone bad, I lose sleep over it. If I got an employee that's upset, I lose sleep over it. If I got a customer that we can't get water for that mattered and heck at us, I lose sleep over it. So I don't know. I mean, I guess if you care about what you do, you're going to take that, and I don't go home necessarily with guilt, feeling like, oh my God, I'm just the worst guy in the world. But I care about that stuff, and it bothers me, and I lose sleep over it.
I struggle with that a lot, is I think why I asked that question, personally, and trying to find the balance of accepting that, hey, if you want to be the guy in the driver's seat, there's responsibility that goes with that, and that's part of the nature. And then also saying, but don't let it eat your ass, if you will. Don't let it I think sometimes I let it prevent me from moving forward, or, seeing the good that does happen. It's just the worry thing, maybe for me, it's separating worry versus validity. What's valid to be concerned about and what's just the sky is falling, right? Like, because we could always make an argument that the sky is falling on some level.
Oh yeah, there's always that.
But it's something that, and it's hard sometimes to describe that to other people. I know I've struggled like with my friends of just that feeling of responsibility, maybe, when you're providing for, employees and the community and these other things. Like, I take it very seriously, and it consumes me a lot. There's a lot of just between my two ears conversations that happen, and they're not always productive. It's just like, holy moly, what am I doing?
Yeah. Well, and then to add another piece to the puzzle, when you have your wife working with you, and thank God she did and come in, because that literally helped save our business and made it what it is today. But when you go home, you want to be back to a husband and wife, not and our offices are close together, but she's dealing with different aspects of the business than I am. And sometimes you get home and you start talking about that, and we both got to go, okay, well, you know what? Let's not ruin our night and our dinner and our everything. Let's try to leave that behind. But sometimes you can't. You just can't. So
what about finding the work-life balance, right? Like, I feel that you're a very active guy, and I'm assuming, but outside of work, you like to have fun, right?
Absolutely.
And do things. And so was it hard for you to find that balance at all, or,
that came fairly naturally for me. And I think losing my parents at such a young age, they were in their early 40s, and to know that tomorrow's not given to you, to live your life as fully as you can. Yeah. And I've been able to do that. My wife and I do a lot of traveling together, and separately at times too. We've, really gotten a fire to do some different hunting adventures and that kind of thing. So we've been fortunate to be able to do that.
So that's maybe a silver lining that you would never wish upon anyone with losing parents at an early age. But a silver lining is understanding that tomorrow's not promised.
Yeah.
And, I actually crunched the numbers on, I was thinking about that today before our conversation. If I live to 80, I have 2,100 weeks left, which is a crazy thing to think about. Like that's not, that doesn't sound like too many to me,
right?
And so, I guess that serves. You better get to living how you want to live.
Yeah,
right.
You better live. If I die leaving this today, I had a pretty good life. I had a pretty good life. I don't intend on dying leaving here today, but
Yeah.
again, it's been a pretty good life. But
Yeah.
I know I'm in the fourth quarter of the game now, you know?
Yeah. I think one thing that, and again, I haven't known you outside, of just normal small town stuff too much. But one thing that I've always respected and appreciated is being a business owner for as long as you have. I've never felt that you were like very calloused as far as I know other business owners. And it's just like, I feel like they've been in it for too long. It became the identity, and they just have they're just very hard and calloused individuals. And it's just about the business and the money and, it's sharpening the pencil to the point of where it's too sharp, and have you had to cognizantly and intentionally work on that to not become calloused and still every time I've seen you, it's pretty happy-go-lucky. You look like you're happy to be here, and I appreciate that.
And I guess to some degree you do, and you gotta let some of that go and not get super calloused about it. Yeah. I think if it gets to the point that it's not fun anymore, that it's probably time to hang it up. And I can say that it's hard when you get in my position, and by that what I mean is, if a customer's really searching for me now, not that I'm retired, but I'm not there a lot, and I'll admit that, but when I'm home, I am there. But if they're looking for me, most of the time it's because they're not happy about something. Yeah. Either the well bill was more than they thought, or one of my guys didn't do their job, or whatever. And if an employee is looking for me, it's because they're not happy about something. So, or my mechanic's calling me because something's, this way. So unfortunately what happens is most of the time now when they're searching me out, it's because there's something wrong going on. Yeah. And so when you're getting fed all of that, you can't help but sometimes let it get your dauber in the dirt a little bit. For sure. And I try to pick that up and be that happy guy, because I'm a pretty happy guy, even though I've been through some real shit storms, I'm a pretty happy guy.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, absolutely. No, well, like I said, I appreciate that. And that's awesome. So I do have a couple things, as we kind of near to wrap up here, just some random questions that I thought might be fun to throw at you. So you're 30 years old and you have $100,000. What would you do with it?
Buy another drill rig.
Is that right? So maybe for someone that's not in drilling, though, it would be to reinvest in yourself or business, or look for growth opportunities with that money?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Yep, for sure. And that's what we've really tried to push, because in our company, it's a young man's job most of the time. And a lot of these kids are like I was, well, I'm never going to get old, and I'm going to, if I make $100, I'm going to spend $99.99 of it, kind of thing. So my daughter Elena and Sue especially have really pushed our people, and that's why this ESOP and the IRAs we do in different things, trying to show them. Alan Marucci was awesome sitting down with us and sitting down with our kids, showing them compounding money and taking, if you put this much away at this age, when you're this age, it's going to turn into this.
The seventh wonder of the world. Compounding interest.
Yeah. So, we're trying to get that through to our young people. So if you do get that money, don't spend every bit of it. Put a little bit of it away.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't have this written down, but side question to follow that. As you continued to grow, how many employees do you have roughly?
60.
Did you ever have to do any kind of, continuing education, whether that's reading personal books or going to a seminar or anything, as far as leadership and managing people? Or is that something you more learned School of Hard Knocks?
A little bit of both, probably more of the School of Hard Knocks. Now the CEU side of it, of course, now there's CEUs required for every license that our guys carry and I carry. And that's kind of a little different sort of thing, as the industry changes and learning the new equipment. But just to keep your licenses requires the CEUs. Management training, like I said earlier, I didn't go to college for very long. Yep. I did go to a car school for a little bit and sales school for, a week, an intensive deal. We've hired a couple of people. The company has hired a couple of people that we've brought in to do little, 1-2 day seminar things. But just those are the kind of things, but by far the School of Hard Knocks.
And is a lot of your success too, could it be attributed to putting the right people in the right places?
Absolutely.
As far as having that trust, with whoever your senior team is, being able to know that they make the right decisions within how you would run the operation.
Recognizing the aptitude of the people and trying to get them in the right spots. And a lot of times you mess up, your first thought was wrong, and think, I got this person in the wrong spot. They would be better doing this versus what they're doing. And sometimes you fix it, sometimes you don't, but.
And do you guys spend a bunch of time like on your model for that? Like for, if you have a leader in your business or a foreman maybe or something, like do you go through and teach them your expectations essentially of saying, hey, this is how I want you to treat the guys underneath you. This is the business philosophy, yada, yada, yada. Or is it more just is it a learned behavior by your modeling and leadership?
I would hate to say it's more by learning. I wish that we could do more of what you just described. And I think our daughter, Elena, who came from the retail world, she managed Victoria's Secret and Arden Bees and those kinds of things. So obviously it has nothing to do with well drilling, selling bras and panties, but her retail experience, her management abilities of handling that, she's really brought some new, younger mindsets to that. And she's really good about that. And that's good. My era was, well, do your dang job, that's it, or I'll kick you in the butt, or go, there's the door kind of thing. Not that I was a hard person, but that kind of thought process.
And there's been a little bit of shift in that, I think maybe Elena and I and other people of that demographic, there's a time and a place for that, but you can't just rule by that anymore.
No.
You gotta meet in the middle too, and look at people for, who they are and meet them where they're at for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah. What about if you were mayor for one day, what's one thing you would change?
Oh my God, you come up with some real dandies, and it's funny because people back in the day would say, well, why don't you run for mayor and stuff? Well, thankfully I didn't live in the city of Colville, so I didn't even have to consider that.
Yep.
Boy, and that's like an elephant. How do you eat an elephant? You take one bite at a time. So I don't know what the biggest thing, one of the big things right now on the radar is the airport. And that's been all around for a long, long time and gets some steam and then it runs out of steam. But that would be the thing that I would like to see happen for the area is an improvement on the airport.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's fair. So what about, and again, if this one we don't need to dive to if you don't want to, but I just on a surface view, do you have any tips with just dealing with personal loss? Being so young when you lost your parents, I know you've had other loss in your family. Like, is there anything that helps a guy get through that? I asked that one just because I think there's value for other people listening, to hear that. The other reason I asked that is that I've been so fortunate to not have major loss in my life. Like, it's coming at some point, and I think it's probably one of the most fearful things that I dread, because I've been so fortunate, to be pretty lucky with that. But it's something that I maybe spend too much time thinking about at times, but I'm also, I really admire people that have been able to get through that because I can't imagine what that must be like. But
yeah, and that is a tough one. Obviously, losing my parents when I was young was really, really hard. I was really close to my dad. I was close to my mom. I cried a lot back in those days, and I was dating George Anderson's daughter, Sue Poe, and we were, dating in high school and stuff. And I spent a lot of time with her mom and dad, George and Betty. They were great support for me, and people talk about, kind of getting over it and stuff. You never get over anything like that. So to say that you're going to get over a traumatic loss is, that's a misstatement. You learn to live with it. I know that mom and dad would be proud of all four of us. And I know they're looking down going, you know what, we must have done okay with those kids while we were here. And then my next loss was my dad had two sisters. And after the plane crash, by will, my dad's sister Marilyn and her husband Dwayne, who was an airline pilot for TWA at the time. They lived in San Jose, California. I had 1 year of high school left and obviously didn't want to move to San Jose, California. We had some really good friends of my mom's friends, Virgil and Connie Hawkins, and they agreed with my aunt and uncle that they would come live at the family farm in Arden for that year for me to finish high school. and my little sister Wendy, who was only 9, and my brother Steve, who was 13. My sister Julie had just graduated and was moved on to the University of Puget Sound. So Virgil and Connie came and lived with us for me to finish that high school time, which was really, really good. So my other aunt, Janet, who's still alive today, she's the one I was setting up in the treehouse we were talking about. Yeah. Her daughter, who I was really close to, and her husband was retired military. He finished his military career as a colonel in the Air Force. Super good guy. I loved Uncle Dick a lot. And he and Dwayne helped me a lot when Mom and Dad had crashed. But their daughter, Lisa, got cancer and died at 20. And that was really hard because we were close. Our first cousins, we became more like brothers and sisters because of losing my parents. So I had to deal with that. That was a tough blow. Then we move on. Excuse me. Then we move on. My daughter, Elizabeth, and her husband now, Ross Challoner, and Ross just retired from the Green Beret Army stuff. But when they got married, Wyatt Goldsmith was a very good friend of theirs and was in the wedding party. Yeah. And Wyatt's the local guy that all of you guys know here that we lost Wyatt in Afghanistan, and I think it was July 15th of 2011. Well, my son-in-law that was married to our oldest daughter, Tasha, Nick Sprotzoff, who was Special Forces Marine, and I remember we hosted, there was 80 of them came to our place after Wyatt's memorial, bringing his body home from Deer Park and having the service and coming to the house and all that. And John, when John came to the house and, of course, he's terribly broken up over losing his son. And he looks at me and says, how do you bury a son? And I'm like, John, I have no words. I don't know what to tell you, buddy. This is horrible. I said, I've got a son-in-law over there now and could be facing the same issue. And September 11th of that same year, about 2 months later, we get the call that Nick's been killed. Yeah. So our daughter's got a 15-month-old daughter at the time, and she's 7.5 months pregnant with their son, Tank, who's now they're both, our grandkids are here with Tasha. To lose Nick, and he was on the bracelet I'm wearing right now is in memory of Nick. Good guy, 28 years old, 5th deployment, only the good die young thing. Again, you don't get over that. Yeah. How do you deal with that? That was, right now I'm having a hard time, it's still, I think of Nick every day and never get over it. I look at those grandkids, but you live with it, and life goes on. You hate to say, but life goes on. You know that those people have left. He knew what he was facing, and he wants those of us that are here to, go on and not sit around and sit on your pity pot and cry and that kind of thing. And I know you would feel the same if you got killed today. You want your family to, it's going to hurt, and you know that, but you want them to pick themselves up and go on. So we knew we had to do that. You have to do that. And my Uncle Dick, my Aunt Janet, her husband, Vietnam vet, retired colonel, spent a lot of time with us. He's one of the guys that ended up committing suicide. And that hit really, really hard, really hard. That's the first one that we've had to deal with in that situation. Yeah. And to not know, I've been depressed at times, but I could never hit a running target, and I'd be running if I was trying to shoot myself. Yeah. That's terrible to lose them that way. And I can't imagine how what you go through to make that decision. Yeah. So to have those kinds of losses that we've lived through, not over a single one of them, never will be. I'll take them to my grave. But my life, I live a full life probably because of that, the silver lining, if you want to call it that. And when you get served lemons, you make lemonade sort of thing. Yeah. You have to. Otherwise, you could sit there in the corner and cry and be depressed and go, why me, God? Why did you pick on me? It's not that way. Yeah. It's not that way. Well, I have a good life.
Yeah. That's incredible. I appreciate you speaking to that. And that's huge. And then always from a distance, I've always appreciated and respected you keeping Wyatt and Nick's name going, right? Yeah. Like that's
never forgotten.
And I don't know. I appreciate that. And I think in small towns, that's huge. I know you and I both got to be part of that thing out at Beaver Lodge,
thanks to your dad and all that. Yeah.
John Goldsmith came out for that. And just that whole evening impacted me for my life. You know, a 4-hour time period
right
will be with me for my whole life. And, and I think you give such sound advice. I don't even know if it's advice, but just experience of continuing to live your life, but also keeping that memory alive of those are good dudes.
Yeah. Those are good dudes.
Yeah.
They're good dudes. And we're going to remember them, and their name's going to be spoken, and our kids are going to remember them, and our grandkids are going to remember them.
I think that's huge. And thank you for doing that. Yeah. And that's, I'm struggling with words too, but that's great. And appreciate that. So
you bet.
All right. Well, Rod, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming on. You know,
I've enjoyed it.
This was great. You know, I think people will find a ton of value in learning and hearing about your story. I know I did. And thank you for everything you've done for this community, you know, and none of, you don't have to do any of that. You know,
none of us done alone, buddy.
Absolutely.
You know, like you say, there's a lot of good people in this community,
but I think that's the leadership thing, you know, and you probably don't even know this, right? And maybe you do a little bit more after having this conversation, but like, I look up to that. You know, I look around and there's a list of probably 12 people and your name's on it, but of people in this community that are of your age group that I go, I hope I'm like that one day, you know, of continuing, you know, that torch thing of selling out for your local community, building a business that's honest, that you believe in, that provides a service. And then to your point, taking all of, you know, the fruit that can provide and then bringing that back into the community and multiple different facets. I guess I just want you to know I see that, you know, and I don't know how often you get told that or not. And I just see that from a distance, right? You know,
right.
And I don't know everything, right? We've talked about a few things here, notable things that we've talked about. And I'm sure it's way more than that. Just how you treat your normal guy on tomorrow when you see him for coffee, right? Like that's huge. And yeah, I hope that you get to feel good about that moving forward as you transition away from business and, you know, whatever your next 20 years are.
These golden years, you know, you wake up with those aches and pains, and I'm not sure about the golden years, but yeah, we hopefully have some good years left to enjoy the grandkids and watch the business transition to the employees. And
are you excited for that?
I am. Yeah. I am. Yeah, I really am.
It's got to be bittersweet on a lot of levels.
It is, yeah. I didn't ever think I would ever sell or whatever. You know, I'd die and give it to the kids or whatever. So, no, I'm excited for our employees. I'm excited. I think it's good for everybody. I think the customer is going to benefit from it. And yeah, I'm excited for the new era.
Yeah, well, I'm excited too. And maybe we can have you back and hear what you're up to in the next year or two. And
sounds great.
Do a follow-up conversation.
Great. Well, good luck with your podcast. Yeah. I think it's awesome, and keep it going. There's a lot of good people out there that you can get here.
Absolutely.
A lot better than me. So just
I don't know about that.
Keep it going.
Cool. Well, thank you. And thanks for everybody for listening.
Hey, you bet, Josh. Good to be here.